Welcome to the Daily News Currents. Today is Tuesday, November 26th, and for today's headlines we have squirting cucumbers shoot their seeds like botanical bombarders. An AI granny is phone scammers' worst nightmare. Alice Brock, restaurant owner made famous by a song, dies at 83. Trump has promised lower taxes. These are 3 ways it could impact you. Macy's says an employee hid as much as $154 million in expenses. Squirting cucumbers shoot their seeds like botanical bombarders. Scientists say they've worked out how the plant can fire its seeds up to almost 40 feet. The hairy, ground-hugging vines of the squirting cucumber, Acabalum elaterium, might seem like an ordinary weedy plant, but take a closer look at the plant, which grows in dry, barren areas in the Mediterranean, and you'll find an extraordinary thing, said Chris Thorogood, a botanist at the University of Oxford Botanic Garden and Arboretum. The roughly 1.5-inch fruits of the squirting cucumber contain toxic chemicals and are distinguished in another way from the green rounds you might put in salad. When they're ripe, they eject their seeds very violently in a stream of mucilage, Dr. Thorogood said. They can shoot up to almost 40 feet. The Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder wrote about these plants about 2,000 years ago. It's long been a mystery why and how the plants can carry out this active vegetative bombardment, Dr. Thorogood said. In a paper published Monday in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, Dr. Thorogood and his colleagues show how the squirting cucumber goes ballistic. Researchers knew that pressure builds up inside the fruit before they blow. Initially, we thought it was rather straightforward, said Finn Box, a physicist at the University of Manchester and another author of the study, but they decided to take a closer look, recording high-speed videos of the cucumber cannons in action. The ripe fruit detaches from the stalk, opening a hole in the cuke's base. From there, the researchers found seeds emerge at speeds of up to 66 feet per second. As the fruit detaches, the stem recoils. The fruit rotates backwards, changing the angle at which the seeds shoot. As slimy fluid spews out, depressurizing the fruit, the seed's speed drops. The whole process takes about 30 milliseconds. The group also made time-lapse photos of stalk-bearing fruit for several days. In the run-up to the seed-squirting event, the ovoid fruits moved from dangling nearly straight down to a roughly 45-degree angle with the stem. That was just something that blew our minds, Dr. Box said. There's a perfect angle and an organism finds it, said Marcus Roper, a mathematician at the University of California, Los Angeles, who wasn't involved with the work. If the seeds shot out nearly vertical, they wouldn't have enough forward velocity to go far. If spit nearly horizontal, they quickly fall to the ground, but the squirting cucumber lines up along the sweet spot in an intermediate angle. The team's time-lapse imagery provided clues about how this occurs. Before the launch, the plant stems become wider, straighter, and longer. The cucumber appears to contract. That suggests that liquid moves from fruit to stem, stiffening the stem so it could hoist the fruit. It is not clear what biological mechanism the plant might use to bulk up its stem. The researchers also calculated the pressure within the cucumber and found that it's similar to that of an inflated mountain bike tire, Dr. Box said. Using that and other data they collected on the plant, the researchers worked out the math behind the dispersal of seeds that allowed them to simulate how hypothetical mutant plants would spread differently. For instance, a stiffer stem would disperse most seeds very near the parent plant. Alternatively, a more pressurized fruit would shoot seeds forward and backwards. Over several generations, these mutants would spread as far as the squirting cucumber that occurs naturally, the team found. It gave us a sense of how fine-tuned evolution has made this particular species for dispersal, said Derek Moulton, an applied mathematician at the University of Oxford and another author of the research. The squirting cucumber shows how plants evolve ways to spread their seeds while being rooted. For plants to generate rapid motion, they have to do something a bit clever, Dr. Moulton said. Finding the physical basis of weird biological things can be useful, said Angela Hay, a plant biologist at the Max Planck Institute for Plant Breeding Research in Cologne, Germany, who wasn't part of the new study. The squirting cucumber has already inspired at least one strategy for delivering drugs within the body. Because of the process and timescale of evolution, she said, it can often come up with design principles as engineers we haven't thought of. An AI granny is phone scammers' worst nightmare. Daisy Harris, an AI-generated English granny, has been stemming scammers with meandering, time-wasting conversations, but can she actually make a dent in the flood of fraud? Daisy Harris likes birds. There's one outside her window. Her cat is named Fluffy. She'll tell you about her knitting hobby. She likes tea and biscuits, and she just can't seem to figure out this internet thing. But perhaps you can explain it just one more time. That's the general vibe of Daisy Harris, an AI-generated granny unveiled this month by big British phone company O2 as a part of its efforts to curb phone scammers. She doesn't have a badge or warrant or any way to really stop them. When an unlucky fraudster dials her number, Daisy does have the power to waste unlimited amounts of their time. There are plenty of human scam baiters out there, people who identify would-be thieves and turn the tables, leading them on meandering conversations that keep them from calling other potential victims. Unlike them, Daisy is free of encumbrances like the need to sleep. These people can't just talk to thousands of scammers, said Morton Lagarde, who helped develop Daisy with VCCP, an advertising company in London. But there's an idea that AI can. Phone scams have reached mind-boggling levels. Tens of millions of scam calls rocketed around the world every day last year, according to the phone security company Hiya. An anti-scam consortium says that more than $1 trillion was stolen, often when targets unsuspectingly turned over bank details, passwords, or other personal information. The internet has only made these schemes easier, and while scammers don't discriminate, older adults are seen as easy prey. In one British study, 40% of people over 75 reported getting scam calls at least monthly, if not daily. Daisy and her befuddlement about technology and eagerness to engage is meant to come across, at least initially, as the perfect target. Her developers say they leaned into expectations, often using their own grandmothers for inspiration. I drew a lot from my gran. She always went on about the birds in her garden, said Ben Hopkins, who also worked on the VCCP project. Instead of using a voice actor to train Daisy, the team opted to use one of a colleague's grandmothers, who came in for some tea and recorded hours of dialogue. A prolific scam baiter based in Northern Ireland who posts on YouTube under the name Jim Browning worked with O2 and VCCP in developing Daisy, pumping her full of techniques to keep scammers on the phone. Among them, go on lots of tangents on topics like hobbies and your family and feign technological ineptitude. In one instance, 3 phone scammers teamed up on a call that lasted nearly an hour, trying to get Daisy to type www. Into a web browser. Still, given the sheer volume of scam calls, Daisy efforts are less a blockade than a small speed bump. O2 customers can't forward shady calls to Daisy. Instead, she answers a few different phone numbers out of the vast haystack of digits that scammers can dial. Although it does disrupt operations on a practical level, it doesn't stop fraud more broadly in any meaningful sense, said Elizabeth Carter, an associate professor of criminology and forensic linguistics at Kingston University, London. Dr. Carter advertised against trying to follow Daisy's lead in messing with scammers. As satisfying as it may feel, the best thing to do if you receive a call from a fraudster is to not engage, to hang up, and report it, she said. Alice Brock, the restaurant owner, made famous by a song, dies at 83. Arlo Guthrie's anti-war staple Alice's Restaurant was inspired by a Thanksgiving Day visit to her diner in western Massachusetts. Alice Brock, whose eatery in Western Massachusetts was immortalized as the place where you can get anything you want in Arlo Guthrie's 1967 anti-war song Alice's Restaurant, died on Thursday in Wellfleet, Massachusetts, just a week before Thanksgiving, the holiday during which the rambling story at the center of the song takes place. She was 83. Vicki Merrick, a longtime friend, says she died in a hospice from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Ever since Mr. Guthrie released the song, officially called Alice's Restaurant Massacre, in 1967, it has been a staple of classic rock stations every late November, not to mention car trip sing-alongs on the way to visit family for Thanksgiving dinner. Miss Brock's restaurant, The Back Room, does not feature much in the song itself. Over the course of a little more than 18 minutes, Mr. Guthrie, doing more talking than singing, recounts a visit that he and a friend, Rick Robbins, paid to Miss Brock and her husband, Ray Brock, for Thanksgiving dinner. A shaggy dog story ensues. Mr. Guthrie and Mr. Robbins take trash to the city dump, but finding it closed, leave it in a ravine instead. The next morning, the police arrest them for littering, and Miss Brock has to bail them out. That night, she cooks them all a big meal, and the following day they appear in court, where the judge fines them $50. Later, Mr. Guthrie is ordered to an Army induction center, where he is able to avoid the draft because of his criminal record. Miss Brock helped write the first part of the song, up until the trial. We were sitting around dinner and wrote half the song, she told writer C.A. Sanders, and the other half, the draft part, Arlo wrote. Mr. Guthrie performed the song at the 1967 Newport Folk Festival, and it was the title track of his first album, released that fall, with its sardonic line, "You want to know if I'm mortal enough to join the army, burn women, kids, houses, and villages after being a litter bug." It became an unofficial anthem for the anti-war movement. The song made Miss Brock famous too, even though by the time it appeared, she had shut down her restaurant. It was an unwanted fame, she said, at least at first. "I was very uncomfortable because public figures are not really treated with much respect," she told WAMC, Northeast Public Radio, in 2014. "They really aren't. What's your name is in the paper. People feel like they could go, 'Oh, are you Alice? Turn around,' like they want to see my behind or something." Through the 1970s, Miss Brock tried her hand at other restaurants. After closing the last one in 1979, she moved to Provincetown, Massachusetts, at the tip of Cape Cod, where she took up odd jobs to support her new career as a painter. And over time, she came to accept that a lot of her fame had cast her. "I resented it for a long time," she told WAMC, "but I've come to realize that people are just delighted when they hear my name, so how can I complain?" Alice May Peckley was born on February 28, 1941 in Brooklyn, though she liked to tell people that she had been conceived in Provincetown. Her mother, Mary Dabrowski-Pulaski, worked in real estate, and her father, Joe, was a printmaker. She attended Sarah Lawrence College, but left during her sophomore year, later citing her support for unpopular political causes. She moved to Manhattan, Lower East Side, where she met Ray Brock, an architect and a sculptor. They married in 1962, and the next year they moved to Stockbridge, Massachusetts. They both worked at the Stockbridge School, a private institution. He was an art teacher, and she was a librarian, where they befriended Mr. Guthrie, a student there, and the son of the folk singer Woody Guthrie. Miss Brock opened The Back Room at the urging of her mother, who also helped the couple acquire a deconsecrated Episcopal church, which they turned into their home, and which is also a part of the story told in Alice's Restaurant. In 1968, the director Arthur Penn made a film based on the song, with Miss Brock played by Pat Quinn. Miss Brock served as a consultant and had a cameo. Coincidentally, a scene in which the screened versions of the Brocks get married was filmed on the same day their divorce became official. Miss Brock is survived by her stepchildren, Becca, Jono, and Fletcher Brock, 2 grandchildren, 1 great-granddaughter, and 2 great-grandchildren. She closed the back room in 1967 and sold the church in 1971. Mr. Guthrie brought it in 1991 to house his archives in a community action center. By then, she had moved to Provincetown, where she tried to put her fame behind her in favor of the tight-knit community she found on the Cape, which she considered her chosen family. She wrote several books, including the Alice Restaurant Cookbook, My Life as a Restaurant, an autobiography, and How to Message Your Cat, a children's book. She also illustrated Mooses Come Walking, written by Mr. Guthrie. Over the past decade, Miss Brock struggled with financial and health issues, and her friends set up a GoFundMe site for her, a situation highlighted in a 2020 feature on the NPR program Morning Edition. Fans of the songs quickly opened their wallets. Within a few days, they had raised more than $170,000. Trump has promised to lower taxes. These are 3 ways it could impact you. On the campaign trail, Donald Trump promised to put more money back in Americans' pockets by cutting their taxes. My plan will massively cut taxes for workers and small businesses, and we will have no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security benefits. Trump pledged at a rally in Raleigh, North Carolina, the day before the election. What will a second Trump presidency mean for your taxes? It could add up to a lower tax bill, but it might also have drastic consequences for the national budget. Trump is likely to renew his big 2017 tax cuts. In 2017, Trump pushed through a major tax overhaul called the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Most of the individual tax and estate tax provisions will expire at the end of the year, and Trump and the Republican-controlled Congress are widely seen as likely to extend them. There's also a big cut to the corporate tax rate, but that does not expire. When it comes to your taxes, extending the 2017 law means preserving the status quo. You probably save some money in your taxes due to the 2017 law, and that will continue if the law provisions remain. For a household making $60,000 to $100,000 a year, these tax cuts mean keeping about $1,000 that would otherwise be due if these cuts expire, say Joseph Rosenberg, a senior fellow at the Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center. For those households making more than $1 million, it means reducing their taxes by about $70,000 on average. But these cuts are costly. Estimates have found that extending the 2017 law would increase the national debt by more than $4 trillion over the next 10 years. And so far, it's unclear how Trump and Republicans plan to pay for the extension of the tax cuts. No tax on tips sounds simple, but it could be messy. Trump's campaign promise of no tax on tips made big headlines, but this provision would affect just a small part of the labor market, only about 2.5% of all employment, according to the Budget Lab at Yale University, and more than a third of tip workers earn so little that they already don't pay federal income tax. Details are scant on exactly how this proposal would work. One question is whether the exemption is only for income tax, or whether it would also apply to payroll taxes. But eliminating tax on tips could probably lead to some squirrely effects. For example, say a tree trimmer usually charges $500 for his services. Now, he might say it costs $300 to trim the tree, but he expects a $200 tip, knowing he won't be taxed on it. Tipping might proliferate into services where it hasn't been common before. Employers might also attempt to reclassify employees as tipped workers and drop their pay to the tipped minimum wage, for which the federal minimum is now at $2.13 an hour. Exempting tips from being taxed would blow another hole in the federal budget and would add about $100 billion over 10 years. Ending taxes on Social Security benefits would hurt Social Security. Among the tax cuts, Trump's promised to exempt Social Security benefits from being taxed. For most current retirees, this proposal would have no effects on their taxes. That's because only about 40% of people who get Social Security pay federal income taxes on it. Paying this tax usually happens if you have other substantial income in addition to your benefits, according to Social Security Administration. But the effects of this change would be huge, and it would make things worse for those who are still years away from drawing Social Security. A big chunk of the taxes on Social Security goes straight into funding the Social Security Trust Fund, so eliminating these taxes means reducing the number for money for Social Security. Social Security is already at risk, and if no one pays taxes on Social Security benefits, that fund will run out sooner than it already is on track to do. Macy says an employee hid as much as $154 million in expenses. A former Macy employee allegedly hid up to $154 million in delivery expenses for nearly 3 years, the retailer announced on Monday. Macy said that it found an issue with delivery expenses in an accrual account and launched an independent investigation according to the preliminary report on the third quarter earnings. The employee, who handled the company's small package delivery expense accounting, intentionally made erroneous accounting accrual entries to hide $132 to $154 million of cumulative delivery expenses from the fourth quarter in 2021 through the fiscal year that ended on November 2nd, 2024, the company said. During this time, the retailer said it recognized $4.36 billion of delivery expenses and added that there's no indication that the erroneous accounting accrual entries impacted Macy's cash management or payments to vendors. The employee is no longer with Macy's, and the investigation has found that no other employees were involved, according to the company. Macy's said it discovered the error earlier this month while it was preparing its financial statements for the third quarter, which ended on November 2nd. As a result of the instance, Macy's said it was delaying the release of its third quarter earnings to allow for completion of the independent investigation. A full report on the quarter's financial results and outlook for the fourth quarter is expected by December 11th, the company said. At Macy's Incorporated, we promote a culture of ethical conduct, CDO Tony Springs said in a statement. While we work diligently to complete the investigation as soon as practicable and ensure this matter is handled appropriately, our colleagues across the country are focused on serving our customers and executing our strategy for a successful holiday season. That is all for today. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye!